The knock came at midnight, but it was not a plea, it was a warning. Tavin Orro opened his forge door and found an orc widow bleeding on his steps, one hand gripping a newborn baby, the other pressed against a wound in her side. Her parrot-green skin was soaked with rain. Her broken tusks trembled as she forced herself to stand. Behind her, across the hanging bridges of the floating island, black-winged hunters were already searching house by house. "Hide him," she gasped. Tavin looked down at the baby wrapped in torn funeral cloth. The child did not cry. He only opened his tiny mouth, and in that moment Tavin saw it, a glowing royal mark carved naturally into the baby's small tusk. Every bell in the forge began to shake. Tavin stepped back, terrified. That mark belonged to the dead Sky-Crown bloodline, a royal family humans and orcs both believed had been erased. Then the widow whispered the truth. They did not kill the royal line. "They only missed my son." Tavin stared at her as if the storm had shoved a nightmare through his door. Outside, the floating island of Veyr groaned under the weight of the midnight rain. Chains thicker than tree trunks stretched from tower to tower, holding bridges in place while the clouds below flashed with violet light. Far beneath the island, something huge moved through the mist, and every bell in the city trembled like it could feel fear. Tavin should have slammed the door. Everyone on Veyr knew what happened to humans who sheltered orcs. Temple law called it treason. The Iron Kraal called it theft, and the sky hunters circling the outer bridges would not ask questions before cutting a man open. But the baby's tusk was still glowing. That small spiral mark, burned gold against the newborn's pale green skin, bright enough to paint the forge walls with trembling light. Tavin had seen that symbol only once before, carved into a forbidden bell hidden beneath the temple archives, where no poor bell forger was supposed to look. The widow saw his eyes change. "You know it," she said. Tavin swallowed. "I know enough to know you brought death to my door." Her broken tusks clenched. Death was already coming. "I only arrived first." A loud horn sounded somewhere beyond the rain. Then another. The hunters had reached the lower bridge. Tavin moved fast. He grabbed the widow by the arm, but she shoved him back with surprising strength, nearly dropping to one knee from the pain in her side. Her black funeral wrap was torn, soaked and stained dark around the ribs. Ash beads hung from her braids, each one carved with names too small for him to read. She looked half dead, yet her yellow eyes stayed sharp, watching his hands, his tools, the knife near the furnace. "I am not your prisoner," she warned. "No," Tavin snapped, pulling open the trapdoor beneath the forge table. "You're worse. You're a secret." Below the floor lay his old storage pit, filled with cracked bells, coal sacks, broken molds, and the last dry corner in the house. Tavin had lived above that forge for 11 years, alone since his wife died in a bell tower collapse. His world was iron smoke, unpaid temple taxes, cold bread, and bells that never stopped, warning people richer than him. Now an orc widow and a marked royal child were crawling into the only place he had left. The baby suddenly whimpered, not loudly, just enough, every bell shard beneath. The floor answered with a soft, haunted ring. Tavin froze. The widow held the child tighter. From outside came heavy boots on the bridge, then a fist against his door. "Open in the name of the Sky Temple." Tavin looked down at the hidden pit. The baby's tusk glowed brighter, and the widow whispered, "If they hear him ring, we all die." The fist struck the door again. Tavin pressed one finger to his lips, then lowered the trapdoor until only a thin line of gold remained beneath the floorboards. The baby's tusk kept glowing through the crack. Vaarka pulled the child against her chest and covered his mouth with the edge of her funeral wrap. But the tiny sound had already awakened the broken bells around them. A low ringing moved through the storage pit. Not loud. Worse. Alive. Tavin kicked a coal sack over the trapdoor, grabbed a hammer from the table, and forced his face into the exhausted look every temple guard expected from a poor worker. Then he opened the door. 3 temple guards stood in the rain, their white cloaks snapped by the wind, bronze masks covering their noses and mouths. Behind them, the hanging bridge swayed over the endless cloud chasm. Lanterns burned blue in the storm, making the guards look less like men and more like ghosts sent to collect debts. "Bellforger Tavin Orro?" one asked. Tavin nodded. "At midnight." "Did another bell crack?" The guard pushed past him without permission. An orc female crossed the west chain, wounded, carrying something. "An orc?" Tavin let out a tired laugh. If an orc came here, you'd find my body on the floor. The guard's eyes moved across the forge. Furnace? Tools, hanging chains. Wet footprints near the door. Tavin saw them too late. Vaarka's footprints. Dark rainwater. Heavy. Too large for his boots. The guard stepped closer. Tavin's grip tightened around the hammer. Not enough to fight 3 guards. Enough to die badly. Then a cracked bell on the wall suddenly snapped loose and crashed to the floor. All 3 guards spun toward it. Tavin did not understand at first. Below the floor, baby Ruun's glowing tusk pulsed once, then faded. The broken bell had fallen exactly where the footprints ended, splashing coal dust over the evidence. The lead guard cursed. "This place is falling apart. That is why you people keep me poor," Tavin muttered. "So I can live under collapsing bells and still repair yours." The guard glared at him but found nothing else. Before leaving, he leaned close and said, "If you hide her, the temple will not hang you. We will cut your forge loose from the island and let the clouds take it." When the door slammed shut, Tavin stood still until the boots faded across the bridge. Only then did he drag the coal sack away and lift the trapdoor. Vaarka was staring up at him with her blade already in her hand. "You almost gave us away," she hissed. "I almost died for you. You opened the door too slowly. You bled on my floor too loudly." For a moment, they just looked at each other, both breathing hard, both angry because fear had nowhere else to go. Then Vaarka tried to climb out and failed. Her strength broke all at once. She caught the edge of the trapdoor, but her wounded side folded inward and she nearly dropped the baby. Tavin lunged forward, taking the child before she could refuse. Vaarka snarled and reached for him, but pain drove her to one knee. "Give him back." "I will," Tavin said, "when you stop bleeding enough to hold him." Her eyes burned with hate, but her hand shook too badly to lift the blade. Tavin carried the baby to the furnace. The newborn was smaller than he expected, wrapped in cloth that smelled of smoke, milk, and cold rain. His skin was soft green, lighter than Vaarka's, and the tiny tusk with the royal spiral no longer glowed. Without the light, he looked almost ordinary, almost helpless. Tavin placed him near the warmth, far from the sparks. The baby relaxed. Vaarka saw it and went quiet. Tavin tore a strip from his own shirt, boiled water in an iron cup, and crushed bitterleaf into the steam. Vaarka watched every move like he might poison her. When he reached for her wound, she caught his wrist. "If you touch me wrong, I break your hand. If I wanted you dead, I would have opened the door wider." She held his wrist a moment longer, then let go. The wound was deep, cut clean beneath the ribs. Not a beast claw, not an accident. A blade had done it. Tavin cleaned it as gently as he could. Vaarka did not cry out, but her tusks clenched so hard one cracked edge cut her lip. The forge filled with the smell of blood, rain, hot iron, and bitter herbs. "You have a name?" he asked. Silence. "Tavin," he said. "Since you are bleeding in my house, you may as well know whose floor you are ruining." A long pause. "Vaarka," she said finally. "Of Nulthane." Tavin's hand stopped. Even poor men knew that name. Nulthane was not a village. It was an old war clan, believed wiped out after the Sky Crown massacre. Vaarka noticed his reaction. "Now you are afraid. I was afraid before. Now I am informed." For the first time, something almost like amusement passed across her face. It vanished quickly. The baby stirred near the furnace and made a small choking sound. Vaarka tried to rise again, but Tavin held up a hand and moved first. He lifted the child carefully, patting his back the way he remembered from years ago, from a life that had ended before it could begin. His wife had carried one child for 7 months. Neither had survived the bell collapse. Vaarka watched him with suspicion that slowly bent into confusion. "You had a child?" she asked. Tavin did not look at her. "No." But the answer carried too much pain to be nothing. The baby settled against his shoulder. One tiny hand gripped the collar of his torn shirt. Outside, another horn sounded, farther away now but not gone. Vaarka lowered her blade, not fully, only enough for Tavin to notice. "Why help us?" she asked. Tavin looked toward the door where rain still leaked through the frame, and temple lanterns moved like blue eyes in the dark. "Because everyone looking for that child has soldiers," he said, "and he only has a wounded mother." The broken bells beneath the floor gave one soft ring, as if something hidden under the island had hurt him. The ring faded, but it left something behind, not sound, pressure. Tavin felt it inside his teeth, inside the iron nails of the floor. inside the furnace stones. The forge suddenly seemed too small for what had just answered beneath it. Vaarka felt it too. Her yellow eyes moved toward the trapdoor, then toward the walls as if the whole floating island had leaned closer to listen. What was that? Tavin asked. Vaarka pulled the baby back into her arms. Old things waking. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you will survive tonight. Tavin wanted to argue, but a shout rose from the bridge outside. Far away, horns called across Veyr in a broken pattern. Not temple horns this time, deeper, rougher, war horns. Vaarka's face changed. The wound, the fear, the exhaustion, all of it disappeared under something harder. They found the west chain, she said. Who? The Iron Kraal. Tavin looked toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw dark shapes gliding between the bell towers. Black wings, bone frames, orc hunters, crossing the storm on windsails made from stretched hide. Vaarka stood too fast and nearly fell. Tavin caught her elbow before she could hit the table. She shoved him off, but weaker this time. You cannot fight them, she said. I was not planning to. You cannot run from them either. That was closer to my plan. A faint sound escaped her. Not a laugh, but something near it, broken before it could live. Tavin barred the door with an iron rod, then dragged a bell mold across the floor. There are old maintenance tunnels under the forge. They lead to the underbell chambers. Vaarka looked sharply at him. No human is allowed beneath the temple bells. No poor human is allowed to eat temple bread either, but they still make us bake it. He pulled aside a shelf and revealed a narrow stone stair hidden behind hanging chains. The air rising from below was cold and wet, carrying a smell of rust, mist, and something ancient sleeping in metal. Vaarka stepped back. For the first time, Tavin saw real fear in her. Not there, she said. You would rather wait for the hunters. The hunters only kill flesh. The underbells take names Tavin did not understand, but baby Ruun suddenly opened his eyes. The royal mark on his tiny tusk glowed again, softer now like an ember under ash. From somewhere far below the forge, a deep answering hum rolled upward. Vaarka pressed her forehead against the baby's. Her voice dropped into a language Tavin did not know. Harsh and beautiful, like stones striking water. It sounded like a prayer and an apology at once. When she finished, Tavin said quietly, "He is not just royal, is he?" Vaarka did not answer. Outside, something heavy slammed against a nearby bridge. Wood screamed. A woman cried out. The hunters had entered the lower quarter. Tavin grabbed a travel lantern, dried bread, a coil of rope, and his forge hammer. Vaarka noticed the hammer. "Is that your weapon?" "It is my profession." "That means no. It means I know exactly where metal breaks." This time Vaarka looked at him differently, not trusting, measuring. They descended the hidden stair together. Tavin went first with the lantern. Vaarka followed, one arm around baby Ruun, one hand pressed to her wound. Behind them, the forge light shrank until the storm above became only a dull roar. The tunnels under Veyr were older than the city. The walls were not carved stone, but fused bell metal, green-black with age. Names had been scratched into them in both human script and orc runes. Some were prayers. Some were warnings. Some had been clawed so deeply they looked written by dying hands. The deeper they went, the more the sound changed. No more rain, no more horns, only a slow vibration, like a giant heart beating beneath the island. Tavin passed a cracked mural half buried in soot. It showed orc hands lifting a crown-shaped bell toward the sky, while human priests stood behind them with chains. He stopped. Vaarka saw it too. The temple said humans built Veyr, Tavin whispered. The temple lied. Her voice was flat, but the pain in it was old. She finally told him the truth in pieces as they moved through the dark. The Sky Crown had not been a throne. It had been a bloodline of soundkeepers, orc rulers who could guide the floating islands through bell marks, carved naturally into their tusks. Vaarka's husband had carried the royal blood, but he had hidden it to protect their clan. When baby Ruun was born with the spiral mark, the Iron Kraal called him a threat. Human temple spies called him a weapon. Both sides wanted the same thing for different reasons. "Your husband?" Tavin asked. Vaarka's jaw tightened. "He gave himself to the hunters so I could run." The ash beads in her braids clicked softly as she walked. Tavin now understood. Each bead was not decoration. It was grief made visible. He wanted to say something comforting, but no words felt strong enough to enter that darkness. So he only slowed his steps when her breathing grew heavy, and pretended not to notice when she leaned against the wall. That kindness reached her more than speech. After a long silence, she asked, "The woman you lost, was she your mate?" "My wife, and the child." Tavin's hand tightened around the lantern. "Never breathed." Vaarka's face softened in the dim light. "Then you know why I knocked." "Yes," Tavin said. "You had nowhere else to carry him." Before she could answer, baby Ruun suddenly began to cry. The sound shot through the tunnel like a struck bell. Every name carved into the walls lit up. Above them, the temple bells stopped all at once. Then a new voice echoed from the dark ahead. Calm, female and cruel. "Bring me the marked child, Bell Forger, and I will let the widow live." Tavin stopped so suddenly the lantern flame bent sideways. Vaarka moved in front of baby Ruun at once, her wounded body shaking but her blade raised. The voice had come from the dark ahead, from the forbidden underbell chambers where no worker, no beggar, no ordinary citizen of Veyr was allowed to step. Then blue temple light appeared between the pillars. Mother Odrava walked out first. Her white robes were dry despite the storm above. Gold rings circled her fingers. A crown of tiny bells rested across her shaved head, but none of them made a sound. Behind her stood 6 temple guards with bronze masks, and behind them, half hidden in the shadows, were iron cages small enough for children. Tavin's stomach turned cold. "You," he whispered. Mother Odrava smiled like a priestess greeting a loyal servant. "I warned your wife once, Tavin. She asked too many questions near the lower bells. So I hoped grief had taught you silence." The words struck harder than any blade. Tavin looked at her, unable to breathe. "My wife died in a tower collapse. She died because she heard what she should not have heard." The tunnel seemed to tilt beneath him. The lantern shook in his hand. For years, Tavin had carried the guilt of that night. He had believed he missed a crack in the warning bell. He had believed one failure of his hands had buried his wife and unborn child beneath bronze and stone. Now Mother Odrava said it like a minor correction. Vaarka's eyes shifted to him, and for the first time her anger was not aimed at him. It stood beside him. "You murdered his family," she said. "I protected an island," Mother Odrava replied. "There is a difference." Baby Ruun whimpered in Vaarka's arms. The spiral mark on his tiny tusk glowed brighter. The walls answered with a low hum. Names carved into the metal shone in pale green and gold, human names beside orc names, old grief beside old guilt. Mother Odrava's calm face tightened. "Careful," she said. "The child does not know what he is calling." "What is he calling?" Tavin asked, his voice rough. The priestess looked past him toward the deep chamber. "A mistake older than your blood." The guards stepped aside. Beyond them, the tunnel opened into a massive circular vault beneath the island. Tavin had repaired bells all his life, but he had never seen anything like this. A crown-shaped bell hung upside down in the center of the chamber, larger than a house, chained through its mouth with black iron links. Under it was not stone, but a living root of glowing metal that pulsed like a trapped heart. And inside that pulse something moved. A face formed in the light, huge, silent and ancient. A woman's face, but not human. Broad cheekbones, tusk shadows, closed eyes. A crown of broken bell metal fused into her brow. Vaarka fell to one knee, not from pain, from recognition. "The Sky Queen," she whispered. Tavin stared at the imprisoned spirit beneath the island. The stories said she died. Mother Odrava's smile returned. Stories are made for children. Prisons are made for power. The truth opened around them like a pit. Veyr had never been held aloft by temple prayers. It floated because an ancient orc queen had been chained inside its core, her bloodline used as a living engine for human rule. The bells did not protect the island from sky monsters. They kept the queen asleep. Every warning tone, every prayer chime, every holy festival bell had been part of a cage. Vaarka clutched baby Ruun tighter. "His mark can free her." "Yes," Mother Odrava said. "And that is why he cannot remain with you." A violent crash sounded above. Dust rained from the ceiling. War horns roared through the tunnels, deep and brutal. The Iron Kraal had broken into the underways. From the opposite arch, Cernak Vale entered with bone-masked hunters behind him. He was enormous even for an orc, with charcoal armor, scarred parrot-green skin, and tusks carved with kill marks. His eyes locked on the baby. "So the widow did crawl to humans," he growled. Your dead husband would spit blood at the shame. Vaarka rose slowly, blade in hand. My husband died protecting his son from cowards like you. Cernak laughed. Your son is not a child. He is a banner. Clans will kneel to him. Armies will rise for him. The old queen will wake, and every warlord from the Ash Coasts to the Bone Mountains will fight to control his breath. Mother Odrava turned coldly toward him. The temple will take custody of the child. The Kraal will take his tusk, Cernak said. The chamber went silent. Vaarka's face changed. Tavin saw it then, not just fear, not just grief, but the full horror of a mother who understood exactly what both sides wanted. The humans wanted the baby alive as a key. The Iron Kraal wanted him mutilated as proof that no royal line would ever return. Baby Ruun began to cry again. This time, the great crown bell moved. One chain snapped. The sound that followed was not loud, but it forced every guard, hunter, and priest to step back. The sleeping Sky Queen's eyes opened beneath the island, glowing the same gold as the mark on the baby's tusk. Mother Odrava shouted, "Seize him!" Cernak roared, "Cut the mark out!" Both armies rushed forward at once. Tavin looked at Vaarka, then at the crown bell, then at the forge hammer in his hand, and finally he understood. This child had not come to his door because Tavin was strong. He had come because only a bell forger knew where a prison made of sound could break. Tavin moved before fear could stop him. He slammed his hammer against the nearest chain anchor. The sound cracked through the chamber like thunder trapped in metal. The temple guard stumbled. The Iron Kraal hunters flinched. Even Mother Odrava turned her head for one sharp second. Vaarka used that second. She drove her shoulder into the first guard, twisted his spear from his hands, and struck him across the mask. Bronze shattered. The guard fell screaming. Baby Ruun was tied against her chest now, wrapped tight in the torn funeral cloth. His tiny glowing tusk pressed near her heartbeat. Cernak charged straight for her. Tavin hit the chain anchor again. This time he listened, not with his ears, with his hands, with the bones of his arms. Every prison had a weak point. Every bell had a place where the sound gathered before it broke. The crown bell above them was not just chained by iron, it was tuned by cruelty. The temple had spent centuries striking smaller bells across Veyr to keep this one sleeping, and now baby Ruun's cry had ruined their perfect silence. "Tavin!" Vaarka shouted. He looked up. Cernak had reached her. The bone marshal swung a black axe toward the baby's side. Vaarka turned her body, so the blade struck her wounded ribs instead. The impact threw her against the glowing wall. She did not drop the child. She did not even scream. She only bared her broken tusks and stabbed upward, cutting Cernak across the face. Cernak laughed through the blood. "That is why widows should burn with their husbands," he growled. "How you keep fighting after your story is over?" Vaarka's eyes burned. "My story is breathing against my chest." Mother Odrava raised both hands, and the tiny bells on her crown finally rang. The sound was thin, sharp, and wrong. The great Sky Queen's glowing eyes flickered. The chamber darkened. Chains tightened around the crown bell as if pulled by invisible hands. Baby Ruun began choking. Vaarka looked down in terror. The mark on his tiny tusk flashed wildly, then dimmed. She is smothering the bond, Tavin realized. Mother Odrava smiled, still ringing her crown bells. "Our child cannot command what he cannot breathe through." Tavin ran toward her, but two guards blocked him. He swung the hammer low, breaking one guard's knee armor, then caught a spear shaft with both hands as the second guard drove him backward. Pain shot through his shoulder. His feet slipped near the edge of the open core, where endless blue mist churned beneath the island. Then, Vaarka shouted something in the old orc. "Tongue." The carved names on the walls lit again. Human. Names, orc names, dead names, all. "Of them," the hollow choir answered. "Thousands." Voices rose from the metal. Not singing, not speaking, but remembering. The guards covered their ears. Hunters dropped to their knees. Mother Odrava's crown bells cracked one by one, but the priestess kept ringing them with bleeding fingers. Tavin saw the truth then. The Sky Queen could wake, but not through the baby alone. The child carried the mark. Vaarka carried the Bloodline's grief. But someone had to strike the crown bell from inside the bell core. Where the sound had been chained shut, someone had to stand in the place the temple designed to kill anyone who touched it. Vaarka saw him looking. "No," she said. Tavin did not answer. Tavin, no. He stepped toward the open core. Vaarka broke away from Cernak with a desperate twist, but the bone marshal grabbed one of her ash bead braids and yanked her back. The beads snapped, scattering across the floor like small bones. Names rolled into blood and rainwater. Cernak reached for baby Ruun's face, Vaarka, caught his wrist with both hands and bit into it. With her broken tusks, he roared. Tavin jumped into the bell-core. The world became sound. There was no floor inside, only a narrow ring of iron around the hanging heart of the crown bell. Wind blasted upward from the blue mist. The Sky Queen's face hovered below him, enormous and wounded, her golden eyes fixed on the hammer in his hand. Tavin could no longer hear the battle clearly. He could only feel it. Vaarka's rage through the walls, the baby's fading heartbeat through the bell, the dead names pressing around him like hands. Mother Odrava screamed, "Do not strike it! You will drop Veyr from the sky." Tavin looked back once. Vaarka was on her knees, holding baby Ruun with one arm while Cernak raised his axe for the final blow. Tavin lifted the hammer. He thought of his wife, of the unborn child who never breathed, of every year he had lived believing his hands had failed them, of the poor quarter above, where people trusted bells they did not know were built from a Queen's prison. Then he struck the crown bell. The first blow shattered the hammer handle. The second sound came from his own bones. The chamber exploded with golden light. Cernak's axe stopped inches from baby Ruun's invisible force, slammed him backward into the wall. Mother Odrava's crown burst apart, tiny bells flying like teeth. The temple guards fell flat. The Iron Kraal hunters crawled away from the awakened sound, terrified at last. Tavin collapsed inside the bell core, blood running from his ears, but he saw the chains break, one by one. The Sky Queen rose through the floor as a body of light and storm metal. She did not scream. She simply breathed, and the entire floating island moved. Veyr tore free from its hidden anchor chains. Bridges snapped away from temple towers. The storm outside split open, revealing dawn behind the clouds. Vaarka crawled to the edge of the bell core, baby Ruun crying safely in her arms. "Tavin," she called. He could barely hear her, but he saw her face. For the first time since she had knocked at his door, the Orc widow was not asking him to save her child. She was begging him to live. Tavin did not fall. For one terrifying moment, Vaarka thought he had. His body slipped against the inner rim of the bell core, one hand hanging over the endless blue mist beneath Veyr, his broken hammer lying beside him in splinters. Blood ran from both his ears. His eyes were open, but unfocused, staring at the golden storm that had risen through the chamber. Vaarka dragged herself forward with baby Ruun clutched tight to her chest. Behind her, Cernak Vale tried to stand. The bone marshal's armor had cracked from shoulder to ribs. His tusks were bleeding. His hunters were scattered around the chamber, some unconscious, some crawling backward, as the awakened Sky Queen filled the vault with light. Cernak looked at baby Ruun one last time, and hatred twisted his face into something almost desperate. "This child will break the world," he spat. Vaarka turned slowly. "No," she said, her voice hoarse. "Men like you already broke it." Cernak reached for his axe. The Sky Queen breathed, that was all. A wave of golden sound rolled across the chamber. It did not strike like a weapon. It passed through stone, metal, bone, and memory. Cernak's axe crumbled into black dust. The kill marks carved into his tusks burned white, then vanished. For the first time, the bone marshal looked small. The floor split beneath him. He fell into the blue mist without a scream. Mother Odrava was still alive near the shattered temple steps, dragging herself through broken bells and fallen chains. Her white robes were torn. The little crown bells that had once made people bow now lay scattered around her like dead insects. "You do not understand," she rasped. "Without control, Veyr will drift into war. Humans will die. Orcs will rise. The Empire will come." Vaarka stepped over the broken chains, baby Ruun quiet against her chest. "Then let them come to a world that is awake." Mother Odrava reached toward the baby, not with strength now, but with the last ugly hunger of someone who had spent her life mistaking power for protection. Before her fingers could touch the funeral cloth, the carved names on the walls glowed again. Human names, orc names, children's names, workers' names, refugees' names. The hollow choir whispered through the underbell chamber. And Mother Odrava heard every life the temple had buried under holy lies. Her face broke with fear. The floor beneath her turned bright, and the old priestess was pulled down into the root metal of the island, swallowed not by death, but by the truth she had kept chained. Then the chamber became still. The Sky Queen's great face lowered toward Vaarka. Vaarka could not stand any more. She dropped to one knee, her wound open again, her ash beads scattered, her widow braids loosened around her shoulders. Baby Ruun stirred in her arms, and the royal spiral on his tiny tusk glowed softly. No longer sharp with danger, the Sky Queen did not speak in words, but Vaarka understood. This child was not born to sit on a throne. He was born to return the sky to those who had been forced to live under cages. The golden presence moved toward. Tavin Vaarka's heart slammed hard. No, please. She did not know who she begged. The queen, the dead, the island, or the storm itself. She only knew that Tavin had given everything when he owed them nothing. He had opened a door when every law told him to close it. He had held her son with hands that had already lost a child. He had struck the bell knowing it might kill him. The Sky Queen touched his chest with one hand made of light. Tavin gasped. Vaarka crawled into the bell core and caught him before he could slide again. His weight nearly pulled them both down. She held him with all the strength left in her ruined body, pressing baby Ruun between them, as if the child's warmth could anchor him to life. "Tavin," she said, "look at me." His eyes shifted, slow and confused. His lips moved. She leaned close. No sound came. At first, Vaarka thought his voice was gone. Then she saw the blood at his ears, the distant look in his face, the way he blinked when she spoke but did not truly hear her. The crown bell had taken his hearing. Not all of it, perhaps. Not forever, perhaps, but enough that the world around him had become muffled and far away. Vaarka pressed her forehead to his. "You foolish human," she whispered, though he could barely hear it. "You were supposed to survive before being brave." Tavin's mouth curved faintly. He lifted one trembling hand and touched baby Ruun's back. The baby cried then, a real cry. Small, angry, alive. Tavin could not hear it clearly, but he felt it against his palm. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since Vaarka had met him, the grief in him did not look like a locked room. It looked like a door opening. Above them, dawn broke. The underbell chamber cracked open to the sky as Veyr rose through the storm clouds. Temple towers split from their old foundations. Chain bridges snapped away from imperial anchors. The floating island, silent for centuries except for warning bells and controlled prayers, began moving freely across the heavens. People ran into the streets above. Poor workers. Temple servants, children from the lower bridges, human families clutching lanterns, orc prisoners breaking cages beneath the temple. Everyone looked upward as the sky changed from violet storm to burning gold. No bell rang, yet every piece of metal on the island trembled softly, as if remembering its true song. By midday, the survivors gathered near Tavin's forge. The forge had nearly collapsed. Its door hung crooked. Rainwater filled the cracks in the floor. Broken bells lay everywhere, but the furnace still held a faint orange glow. Vaarka sat on a low iron step, while an old human healer stitched her wound. No one dared approach too quickly. Some humans stared at her tusks with fear. Some orcs stared at Tavin with suspicion, but baby Ruun changed the air. When Vaarka lifted him, the mark on his tusk shone warm, not royal gold now, but ember light. The glow touched human faces and orc faces alike. It did not command anyone to kneel. It simply made the bells around them hum. Tavin, wrapped in a rough blanket, watched from beside the forge wall. Vaarka came to him slowly. She had removed the broken ash beads from her braids. One by one, she placed them on a thin wire above his furnace. The beads clicked together softly, names of her dead hanging among his broken tools. Tavin looked at them, then at her. Vaarka touched her chest, then the beads. Then baby Ruun a promise. The dead would not be forgotten. The living would not be abandoned. Tavin understood without hearing. Days passed as Veyr drifted beyond the Empire's sky routes. The island no longer hovered like a prisoner over poisoned earth. It sailed through open cloud seas, guided by the sleeping, waking presence of the Sky Queen beneath its roots. Refugees came out of hidden cells. Workers tore down temple banners. Orc hunters who had followed Cernak either surrendered or vanished into the lower mist. No one called baby Ruun king. Vaarka refused it. "He is a child," she said whenever someone tried. "Let him be one before you build a crown around his throat." Instead, they called him the Bell-Marked, and they called Tavin something he hated even more: hero. He would shake his head whenever the word reached him, whether he heard it clearly or only read it from lips. He returned to his forge as soon as he could stand, repairing cooking pots, cracked hinges, and storm braces. His hearing came back in fragments: low thunder, heavy bells, Vaarka's voice when she stood close, but much of the world remained soft around the edges. He learned to feel sound through metal. Vaarka learned to speak with her hands when words failed. At sunset, weeks later, they stood together beneath the repaired bell tower. Baby Ruun slept in Vaarka's arms, his tiny tusk dim beneath the fading gold sky. Tavin rested one hand on the tower's new bell, forged from broken temple bronze and old orc crown metal. Vaarka looked at him. "Will it ring?" Tavin placed her hand beside his on the bell. Together, they felt the answer before it made a sound. A deep, gentle vibration moved through the tower, through the forge, through the floating island, and into the clouds beyond. Not a warning, not a command, not a prison, a heartbeat. Below them, humans and orcs looked up as Veyr sailed into sunrise-colored mist, carrying its wounded, its guilty, its hopeful, and its impossible child toward a sky no one owned anymore.